Hello, everybody. Really, we are so excited to share with you Let's Make a Game. We have been working with Games for Change over the last several months to bring you this awesome panelist. I'll say that myself, but I hope that you enjoy it, and the rest of our team hopes you enjoy it as well. Sammy and some of our team are going to kind of click through the deck for me, so you'll hear us throughout say click. And just to give you a sense for the kind of vibe that we're after, definitely feel free to stop us, shout out, raise your hand, put questions in the chat. We can't see any of you. So we're going to present this deck, and unless you stop us, we're going to keep going. There will be plenty of ways and time at the end that you can ask any questions, but feel free throughout the process and throughout tonight's meeting to just throw anything in the chat or shout out to us if you have any questions on what we're sharing. With that, let's kick it off. I think you might be familiar with the prompt that we had shared. The world needs play more than ever, and the gaming industry is exploding with thousands of new entrants each year. How will you make sure you're building a game that will resonate with audiences and break through in a hugely competitive landscape? Tonight, what we will cover is a couple of different things. On the next slide, Sammy, we are going to tell you a little bit about how we identify and define an opportunity, how we create a great play experience, best practices for working as a collaborative team. We all have very unique functions that contribute to what ultimately becomes a game out in market, and how we tell a story so everybody wants to play your game. We know that you are entering into a competition and want to give you a little bit of best practices for what that might look like and how we do it when we sell into the Walmarts and Targets and Amazons of the world. You're going to see tonight a little bit of both how we do the work and what the work looked like. So you'll get a little bit of behind the scenes action from each of us for various games and projects you might be familiar with. And how you make this awesome is being fearless. Please, like I said, ask questions, and then we do have at least one brainstorming opportunity. So drop your notes into the chat, kind of get your creative juices flowing, and join us on that experience. So without further ado, meet our panelists. You're going to hear from us individually, but I'm Kate Sylvia. Say hi, guys, the rest of us.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
We'll all introduce ourselves to you throughout. Sorry, Josh. All right, so let's get started. The first thing I'll share with you is that as it relates to the design process, it is a process and it's a loop. We are going to all across various functions come in, come out, and have kind of a different approach to each of the design phases, starting with empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, testing, and implementation. These don't work in a linear fashion, even though we are going to be presenting it that way. So just know that we'll present a little bit about how each of us touches upon these phases, and that they will be iterative and swirling, and you'll go back to the start and you'll test and you'll learn things and you'll do it all again, even though tonight we're going to present it as if it's a big line. All right, so kick us off. Like I said, my name is Kate Sylvia. I'm the Senior Manager for Product Management at Hasbro Gaming. What that means is I sit in the business and the marketing and brand development function. And what I do is I help define our business and brand strategy across our classics portfolio. So some of the brands and games that you might know from Candyland, Operation, Connect 4, Jenga, The Game of Life, Twister, Scrabble, Taboo, and more. We touch all of those classic board games, but we also identify new ways to play and key areas for growth. And I am the voice of the consumer. We really all are. But together, when we come in and I work through with the team, all of the different phases of development, my job is to kind of say, oh, I think that this is going to react this way. They're going to react this way. This is what they're really going to like, and really kind of help the team shepherd it to a final incredible place. So with that in mind, the first part of our process is really starting with the consumer. We're going to start with who. Really, that's defining who is playing and who is buying the game. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're a little bit different, and it means we have to kind of serve both of those different audiences a little bit differently. But what we really want to do when we think about the empathize phase and defining our consumer is to paint a profile picture of them. And that means what do they want? Who are they playing with? What's important to them when they're playing a game? What kind of experience are they looking for? What really gets them excited? What really gets them frustrated? And really kind of get inspired by how and where they spend their time. So what that looks like for us is on the next slide, kind of defining a little bit about them. And what's really important to know is that there are a wide variety of needs and interests across all consumers. It's really important to get really tight on the experience that you want your consumers to have. You might have a consumer and somebody who's playing that plays for fun, or they really want to win. And those are two very different game experiences. Your audience might be playing with their friends, or they might be playing with their family members. Your consumer might want to really show off how smart they are, and they get really excited about being clever and really solving for something, or they just want to laugh and be silly. And there are games and game experiences that will design to satisfy all of these and other needs as well. When we think about it, how that applies to something like Clue, we have a really great understanding of what consumers expect from this brand. And that is because we do a ton of testing. We have a good sense for what the brand should feel like based on what people have told us. And we know Clue feels cinematic, immersive, and suspenseful. So any experience we design is going to do that too. We know people want to solve for something when they play Clue. They really get excited by that thrill of the achievement and the challenge of that mental workout. That will always be core to the game experience. For Clue, our characters and our iconic story, Scarlet, Peacock, Plum, those are iconic. People have a favorite. We will always keep them in the games, and they love our story. It is an iconic murder mystery, and it really started a genre. We know that this game has fantastic appeal, both with families and with adults, and they love it as a way to connect. When they play a new game, they want it to feel fun and social and thrilling. So we got to make sure that we do that with anything we do with Clue. So outside of painting that consumer profile and that picture, there are other things that we're going to be looking at in terms of identifying and defining an opportunity. On the next slide, a couple of those things we might be looking at is the consumer experience. So if it's a game that they already have, we'll look at consumer reviews, we'll do our own research, and we'll scrape some social sites and see what we can hear from consumers about what they said about their experience with that game. We'll also look for new ways to play, and that might mean we deliver something for a totally new category or a new occasion for play, or we might reach a new audience that we have never reached before. And we'll look at trend and theme. So that could be things like pop culture trends that we see in entertainment, really tapping into nostalgic elements that people are loving and are really kind of harkening back to and really want to see right now. Or we'll look at competitive trends and see what's happening in the landscape that is really rising to the top for inspiration on how we might expand the ways to play. Speaking of competitive trends, going back to Clue, one of the things that we had seen is escape games really rising up in terms of player interest. And so what we found when we did some digging in Europe, especially, and certainly here in the US, there are huge players in the escape game category. And if you haven't played an escape game, these games are one-time play. They usually take about an hour and a half to 2 hours. You've got to kind of crack puzzles and solve for things. And ultimately, you're escaping a location. There's some kind of urgency or peril that you're trying to get out of. It's also story driven. So when we thought about the opportunity for Clue, this made a ton of sense for us to jump into. What that looks like in terms of translating that to a definition of a brief on the next slide is that we really intended and wanted to launch a new segment of escape games. And this was going to be able to reach both up-aged families, so kids who might have played Clue before and might be looking for something a little bit more complex, as well as adult Clue fans, and there are quite a few of them. We wanted to be able to expand our storytelling potential and drive repeat purchase, so there were always new ways and new reasons for you to keep coming back and playing Clue. What we wanted that was different from the landscape and from core classic iconic board game Clue play is that we wanted to make sure that you both cracked puzzles and solved a mystery in order to escape. And we're going to use Clue's iconic rule of 3, the who, where, and what, for differentiation in the category. We wanted to make sure we highlighted our characters and were able to expand both their backstories and the ways that they were represented with different looks. We wanted to make the game collaborative. So you heard me say that players really want a social experience. And in classic Clue, you're competing to be the first to find out the who, where, and what. In this case, you're all working together to solve puzzles. And we wanted to be able to surprise you with something unique in each box. Also, it's a one-time play, and the classic board game sits at $20, so we knew this had to be a lower price point. What that looks like for us was Clue Escape that we launched in fall of 2022. And then on the next slide, what that looks like in practice in terms of a product experience is that we were able to deliver a totally new way to play the game. In this Clue Escape game, you are going to move around a dynamic game board that builds and changes as you play. You will navigate using numbered nodes on the game board corresponding to cards, and there's story driven throughout all of these cards. And as you expand the game board, you'll unlock new rooms, you'll find fun new things and surprises. And you'll also find clues and puzzle cards that you'll have to solve in order to continue your progress through the game. Every Clue Escape game also includes something really unique and different and discoverable. In this case, we did a red reveal magnifying glass, but we've also done safe cracking tools, 3D builds, and a number of other things that I won't share, so I don't kind of give away anything if you guys want to check out Clue Escape in the future. We were really excited about being able to launch this segment. And when we think about growth areas and growth opportunities, this has been a huge, huge boon to Clue. On the next slide, you'll see we were able to launch this and had major, major kudos and awards from the industry, but also from fans who were really excited to see something new happen with Clue. We had fantastic integrations with iHeartRadio. Actually, the Backstreet Boys did an integration with us, which sounds crazy, but it was absolutely incredible. We did it through radio. We had in Europe, our teams create really cool experiences around renting and escaping to the mansion and murder mystery nights. And we've since expanded this to a segment of games that really delivers tremendous growth for our portfolio. So with that in mind, I will now kick it to Laura, who will talk a little bit about game design.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Cullinan. I'm a game designer. I studied industrial design in college, which is all about designing for mass production. So that includes designing shoes, cars, toys, and even board games. So as a board game designer, my main responsibilities include creating gameplay mechanics, as well as outlining the instructions. Testing is a big part of our jobs. We play the game over and over and over again to make sure it's easy to understand, balanced, fair, and of course, fun. I also work on the overall experience of the game. So this includes like the flow of the game, the length, but especially how you feel when you're playing the game. Is it loud and lighthearted, or is it a little more strategic and thought-provoking, like Kate just mentioned with Clue? And lastly, I design all the 3D elements of the game, so like game pieces or any physical or plastic components. I make them aesthetically pleasing and functional when designing. So let's look at a case study of how to design a game. I'll be referencing that design loop that Kate talked about in the beginning, but let's take gestures. I don't know if people know what gestures is, but it's an existing game that is a hilarious high-speed game of charades. The game hasn't been touched in over 10 years, which is kind of a long time, and desperately needed an update. So our first phase in the design process is the empathize phase, where we research kind of what we can grasp players' needs and wants. We do this research through a variety of different ways. We do have an internal research department. We also do something called social scraping, where we look at reviews, people playing the game on social media, just to see what we can learn online. And we concluded that Gestures is a great game. People love it when it works. They love that it's active and it's acting and you're acting out these charade cards. They love that it's accessible for all generations. So like your 5-year-old can play and then your grandma and grandpa can play. It's easy to learn and they love the teamwork and competitive play, but the device or the action timer, the main component of the game, wasn't operating great. Not only that, the unit felt a little bit cheap and unstable when playing this like rambunctious game. So from there, we went to the define phase, which is identifying the problem the designers and everyone else is trying to solve. So we needed to create a new mechanism. We needed to focus on the quality of the game, and we generally just needed to bring more fun and party to this game. So then we went to the next phase, which is my favorite. It's the ideate or the visualize / brainstorming phase. So we could see what this game looks like and what it could be. We looked at different ways to play the game. We added new benefits for the user experience, like customization and on-the-go play. We also ideated on what it could look like. We do that a lot by sketching, and we sketch in some sort of digital software, and we use the Adobe suite. So if you do like drawing, maybe being an industrial designer is right for you. The next step we went into was the prototyping phase. Oh, you can go back one.
Oops, sorry.
The prototyping phase, where we heavily rely on the engineering team to build a manufacturable model. You'll see that on the right. Designers need to have a general knowledge of 3D prototyping abilities and material knowledge to accomplish this step. After that, we go into the testing phase, which we test, like I said, over and over and over again. And we test both with families and internally with the team. We test how the game is working, how the unit functions, and if there's anything we can learn or glean and correct as we go into the next phase. We test over and over again so we can edit gameplay or the components or the content based on the feedback we receive. And finally, the implementation phase, which is essentially the cherry on top of the design. In this phase, we're finalizing colors, we're picking out materials and finishes. During this phase, we also work with engineering, Dan, later on, to make sure everything is working exactly how it should be. We also work with marketing, Kate, to make commercials and photo shoots and everything you see online. And just a quick note for gestures, some of the updates we made is we made the unit bigger and sturdier to solve the quality problems. We also made the cards pop, which made the performance a lot better, and we added a little bit of excitement to the game. We also added customizable cards, a customizable front, and a dry erase pen to add so that each family could add some personalization to the game. We also made this game on the go, to take it on the go, so you can take the Gestures party everywhere. So that's Gestures. I'm going to pass it to Olivia next to talk about narrative design.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I'm a narrative designer. That's my cat, Pan. He is not a narrative designer, but he is very cute. And that's the most professional picture of me, I think, that exists. So I do everything from story to thematic and tonal development, content and rules, naming and taglines. And Kate and Laura talked a lot about how important it is to understand your player and what they're looking for. And when it comes to narrative design, we have the challenge and the privilege of speaking directly to our players. So it's our responsibility in partnership with the rest of the team to build a world that resonates with players and helps them connect with the game and with each other. Click. So here's a little bit more about my whole deal. Some games have a lot of written story and lore. Take D&D, for example. Other games have almost no written story, but there's definitely still one there. You feel it in the theme and the tone, the language that's used, the way you play. For example, Operation. We determine the theme and tone of a game based on the player's needs. Obviously, Operation and D&D have very different players with different needs. Next, content and rules. How do we teach players how to play? We know they hate reading, so how do we help them do less of it? For example, with an instructional video or with rules that are easy for a parent to read to a preschooler who can't sit still. How do we make it interesting? And how do we make game mechanics make sense to players and also feel on theme and in world with things like flavor copy on cards? Last, but certainly not least, name and package copy. Naming is obviously a huge part of the development process, and when it's easy, it is incredible, but unfortunately, that is pretty rare. I'm not sure if you guys knew this, but there's like a lot of stuff out there, and it's all got a name. So a lot of the time, I'll have a great idea, the team will love it, and then we'll send it to legal, and legal will say, sorry, someone's already trademarked this. So 3 things that are important to keep in mind when it comes to the naming process. It's important to have backups, lots of backups. It's important not to get attached to a name. Even if everybody loves it, it's important to recognize that it just might not be available to you or it might not work for that item. And it's also super important not to be afraid to go back to square one, because chances are that at some point on some game, sometime in your career, you will have to go back to square one. You just gotta ride with it. Click. Here's a quick case study on an awesome game we have coming out, I think next week, called Life in Reterra. It's a post-apocalyptic cozy game about building a community using buildings and land tiles. Click. When we got the game in from the inventors, it was mechanically great, and it needed a new story that resonated more with our consumers and fit the gameplay better. So we turned to consumer insights. We knew that post-apocalyptic games were huge, and we knew that cozy games were also huge in this space and fit the gameplay really well. We looked at pop culture references like you see on the left there, and then our graphic designer, Scott, put together this amazing mood board that really helped bring the world together. So early on in the story development process, it's super, super collaborative. I work really closely with my game design and graphic design partners to help build out a story that makes sense for the consumer and the item and all of that. Next slide. So through a series of internal brainstorms, we took all those insights, we made apocalyptic hopeful, we made cozy, unique, and beautiful. Our story is reclaimed by nature, rebuilt by you, not long from now, but not tomorrow. Our world as we know it exists only in remnants. Nature has reclaimed our cities, technology is primitive, and homes and everyday objects are makeshift. You've come upon a plot of land perfect to create a thriving community. Here you'll build to attract inhabitants and try to create the coziest community around. And then on the left, you'll see some of the words that we used early on to define tone. That's also a really big part of the narrative design process, because even for games that don't have a ton of written story, it's important to have the whole team aligned on the tone of voice that we're using so that we're all speaking the same language when we talk about this game and when we communicate with our consumers. Next slide. This is the final product. We'll talk a little bit about this more later, so I'll skip to the next slide, but sneak peek. It's great. We love it. Okay, now it's time for an activity. Hopefully, you guys will all find this fun. So when we're naming a game, oftentimes we'll do these things called name storms, and I will make everybody get in a room and share all their ideas with me. And because, like I said, when you're naming something, it can be a little overwhelming. Sometimes it helps to give ourselves buckets and then ideate within those buckets as we're thinking of name ideas. So I have made up this game. It's not real, wish it was, but I'm going to ask for your help to name a board game where you play as a bee and roll dice to move from flower to collect the most pollen. So I'm going to give you each a minute in each of these buckets. You can just write in the chat. Doesn't have to be a full name, does not have to be good. There are no such thing as bad ideas in a name storm. I'll take everything. It can even just be a word that you think is interesting. Anything is on the table. All right, we're going to start with bucket one. You've got a minute. I'd like things that are bee related. Guys, you're such pros. You're coming for my gig a little bit. Oh my gosh, what's the buzz? Okay, and time. All right, guys, these are awesome. Thank you so, so much. We're gonna move to the next bucket. You'll get a minute to think in that bucket. I would love some names that are mechanic related. So the mechanics involved in this game are dice rolling, so chance, or actual like action of dice rolling. You can play in that bucket as well. And then moving around the board.
Let's see if I need to scan on that.
Risky buzzness.
Anything?
I can use that for a mailer.
These are so cute. Okay, time is up again. Another round of bangers. We've got one more bucket left. These are garden and flower related. You've got 1 minute. Don't hate, pollinate. Rhymes. Rhymes are always a win. I should have put that on my slides.
That's what I did.
Whoa,
All of that,
okay.
right? So see where I was like, as much as I can focus today, this is what I need to be working on. So even if I come in and I do 25 minutes and I leave for 10 minutes and come back again. Like, the Pomodoro tomato thing, that's what I need to be working on.
Oh, I think
Amazing.
somebody might not be on mute. I don't know if anybody can hear that.
Well, that's all the time we have for our little name storm. Thank you guys so much.
Word
These are
got out
awesome.
apparently about me doing this talk with the class, and now other people want me to do it.
Talk with what class?
Uh,
Sorry. Anyway, these are wonderful. You all have bright futures as narrative designers. If that's the path you wish to follow, read a lot, write a lot, play a lot of games. Now I'm going to pass it to the person who makes our stories come to life with art, Sammy.
Hi, thank you so much, Olivia, and what a great exercise that was. I'm Sammy Ventura, and I'm the graphic designer on the games team. And what I do is I get to partner with absolutely everybody in the organization. It's such a fun time. And then I art direct what the games look like. This includes projects like logos and packaging, the art inside the game box. I get to also touch social media art, in-store displays, web design, mobile development, and so much more. If it's a visual part of the game, I am involved. To be a graphic designer, I did go to school for graphic design, and I do mainly use the Adobe suite, so stuff like Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, but I do use other programs such as Figma and Keyshot to help build out my designs. And then some of the skills that have been successful in this role are collaboration, problem solving, attention to detail, flexibility, a strong understanding of typography and layout, as well as knowledge of marketing strategies, consumer trends, and insights. Let's use Taboo as a case study to highlight graphic design in the game industry. Taboo is a brand with over 30 years of well-loved history. Every project begins with a brief from marketing, a design document from product, a copy doc from narrative, and a cost breakdown from engineering. There was also a ton of brainstorms in between all of those functions to make sure we're moving in the right direction. So for this item, let's go over what the brief was and how we got to our solution. So the first ask of the brief was a smaller packaging shape, so it made traveling to friends' house easier with this game. Updating the branding to feel more modern while keeping the logo as well as keeping the Taboo face as it was shown to be a consumer favorite. So with this ask in mind, I explored many different options, but I chose 3 for the purpose of today. But we try to, on the design team, focus on options that span from very safe and comfortable to very wild and out there ideas that are something absolutely new the consumer is not used to for the brand. So once we have our concepts, we'll send them into testing. And testing is a tool that Laura mentioned that we use to define gameplay. But as a brand designer, we use tests in determining what brand and direction best connects to the consumer. Taboo, for example, was tested with over 1,100 adults in the US aged 20 to 40 years old. 51% of testers preferred this branding direction, and several mentioned that the multi-face print was foreshadowing to gameplay, hinting at simultaneously talking and engaging in a multiplayer experience, which is what Taboo is all about. The response and feedback we received definitely helped drive the final branding direction, and we were able to land in a more updated and modern space for Taboo. And once we have updated branding direction, it's then used anywhere this game shows up. Once the branding's defined, I get to once again partner with my marketing team to create promotional materials, and this could be e-commerce pages, websites, mobile apps, and any activations from a brand level, as well as how to play videos. And so the graphics teams, we get to touch every part from ideation prototype to final marketing and consumer interactions. So with all of that said, I will pass this to Dan to share insight on how to bring these games to life through engineering.
Thanks, Sammy. Yeah, so I'm Dan Matarisi. I'm a manager on the engineering team for the board games team at Hasbro. I've been at Hasbro for about 15 years in all different roles, really, all centered around engineering and product development. But right now, I'm currently managing a team of multidisciplinary, truly rockstar engineers in all different engineering roles that contribute to the design, manufacturing, and ultimate delivery of Hasbro's products. Next. So what I wanted to get across here is basically engineering. I don't know if you guys out there are thinking about what you'd like to study. And you might not think of engineering as a way into an industry like gaming, specifically physical board gaming products. But there are actually so many skills and engineering roles needed to bring these physical type products to life. Josh will tell you more about making a video game and digital products. But I'm going to focus for these next few slides on how we bring physical products to life through engineering. Really, we get involved from end to end, from the beginning of the process when it's just an idea, all the way to when a product's on shelf, even for decades, and we're just monitoring what's going on with the product. Next. So, I'm going to go through all different parts of the process and how engineering gets involved. So early on, really upfront in the ideation phase that Laura and Kate have talked about so far, engineering will get involved by looking at technology trends and hunting out what those next trends are going to be. We might send a group of design engineers or electronic engineers to CES, which is this big consumer electronics show that happens in Vegas every year. And we might find, all this amazing technology that's coming down the pike or is already in our homes, like VR and AR or, interesting robotics. But really, we're trying to bring these insights back to the teams that could potentially inspire new ideas and new innovative ways of play. But then another, way that we engineers hunt for technology is in a way that you might not think of, and that's okay. So we know all the cool technology that's coming, but usually technology, when it first hits the scene, is really expensive, right? And our mission is to bring products, to the masses and to millions of people, and that means we have to keep products affordable. So another form of technology trend hunting is figuring out when certain technologies are coming down in cost enough to that it unlocks a new category of play. And one example of that, right? Like we see Wi-Fi chip prices, or like basically Wi-Fi chip would enable us to connect any of our products to the internet or to digital experiences. So as we see Wi-Fi connectivity and Bluetooth connectivity come down and down in price, we can now start to incorporate this technology in like a $20 or $30 board game and bring really interesting experiences that could inspire our design, marketing, and graphic design teams. So next. Also in the ideate phase, which Laura's already talked about, is engineering gets involved in the prototyping phase, and this is definitely some of the most fun parts of all the projects. You can see here, super crude models sometimes go a long way. We could take a model like this, which is just made from laser cut acrylic, and a really clever mechanism where you actually don't know how many times you're going to flush the toilet before the water comes out and gets the splashes the user. This crude model ended up turning into Toilet Trouble, which was a really fun kids game that we made about, I think, 6 years ago. That was really a hit. So you could see kind of before and after, from prototyping all the way to a finished product, how early models can represent really a simple start, but it tells you all you need to know when you test with kids and consumers. So Next. Also in the ideate phase, super early on, we have no choice but to think about how much these games will cost to make. And this is really important. I already spoke to this a little bit. It's our mission to bring these experiences to as many people as possible. So in order to do that, we need to always be trying to get as much feature or as big of and great of an experience as we possibly can for the lowest cost possible so that we could ensure that we can make millions of these and get them out to as many people as possible. So we go through this really detailed process where we'll look at prototypes, and then we might have to really think about every single piece and part that's in the game. Like this electronic skill and action game you see here, it's called Bullseye Ball. We might need to, have a cost for every single part. So we're gonna have to think really early on about how it's going to be manufactured and put together in a factory, and then the types of materials that we'll use. So we get into this really detailed breakdown very early on when we're just in the ideation phase. Next. Kind of like midstream in the product development process, I would say, is when we hit implement. And here engineering takes on kind of a driver's seat type of role. We might have an electronics engineer put together something like this really detailed schematic for the electronics in a game. And this is, this is an example of a specification or a spec. And these are very detailed documents that our manufacturers can then use to make exactly what we need. So this, detailed specification ended up turning into our new electronic battleship, which, we just launched this year as well. Another example of specification, would be like Bullseye Ball, which we just showed you on the cost estimation piece. We put together, in conjunction with the design team, really detailed product specs too for the physical pieces so that our factories know exactly how big everything needs to be and how all the parts need to work. Click. Also in the implement phase, we have we have manufacturing engineers that are figuring out how we can most efficiently make these products. And we work really closely with our factories and their team of engineers as well, to come up with manufacturing processes. So you see here, this is Atomics. It's a brand new brain teaser that we just launched. Think of, we're trying to compete with Rubik's Cube here. And this puzzle twists, and it has all these beads that are assembled into these channels. And you're trying to basically align all the colors. You see it in the solved state here, actually. This machinery was being developed. It's actually being run at a very slow speed right now. As you can imagine, if we were trying to put these together all by hand, weaving those beads into the channel, it could be a really difficult manufacturing process. So engineers have to figure out automated and robotic ways to assemble these products. And that's what you just saw there, is this production line kind of in development going really slowly. But all those robotic arms are loading the beads in sequential order, just the perfect amount of beads every time. And then you get a finished product that actually is ready to be like assembled into the package as well. I don't know if you saw like the wire hanging out of the sides. The machines are also assembling in kind of wire that packs the product into the package. So next. Another case study here, and this is where engineers get involved. This is kind of an example of engineers getting involved end to end. In the empathize portion of the process, where we're trying to listen to consumers and hear what their problems are so we could fix them for them. We also have basically, we call them reliability engineers. You could think of it, it's kind of like quality control, where they're always monitoring the field and looking for technical problems that we could address as engineers. But it also puts these consumer insights right in our face, like Hungry Hippos, for example. It wasn't difficult to like read our product reviews and see like, oh, there are a lot of things we could work on to make this game better. We had updated the graphics over the years, but hadn't updated the actual like plastic game itself. So we identified just from the same social scraping techniques that you've heard us talk about so far. It was easy to figure out that like it was really difficult to reassemble this game every time. It was really difficult to put back in the package. Kids had trouble. I mean, this game is for 4-year-old kids, and the marbles are pretty small. They had trouble, pulling the marbles out of the trough the way that it was designed previously. But it was a great game. You know, it's a great game also, but there are always, you know, ways that we can improve. We also, you know, the reliability engineers keep in touch with our customer service department, and they monitor kind of calls that we get and emails, and people contacting the company. We found that Hungry Hungry Hippos was one of the worst, you know, violators, or that's one way to put it, but everybody lost the marbles at some point, right? So, and that probably had a lot to do with how difficult it was to restore the product. So, if you click to the next slide, all of these insights informed a new Hungry Hungry Hippos that we just relaunched this year. The product does not need to be assembled out of the box. You just need to flip the levers back when you pull it out. The dexterity problem that we saw kids having, we basically came up with a new mechanism to where the marbles just automatically reloaded. So the kid didn't have to pick up the marbles after every game. And then you see how easy it was to restore the product. And we included a case to store the balls. So we hope that this cuts down on missing parts, and, you know, meaning a game like this, if you lose too many marbles, it's not the same game anymore. So we think that we made a lot of great improvements to a product that's been out for years, and we're really excited about it. Next. One last note here. You've heard a lot about Life in Runeterra. You're going to hear some more. We're really excited about this game, but wanted to use this game as also a way to illustrate how engineers get involved from a sustainability perspective. If you're passionate about sustainability, engineering is a great way in. You know, we have a lot to do with, you know, the materials a product is made from, and how it's manufactured. So with the narrative that you just heard Olivia talk about with Life in Runeterra, where it's all about, you know, post-apocalypse rebuilding a planet. We wanted to be able to say that our game was made with recycled materials, was as sustainably made as we could possibly make it. So we worked with our factories and our suppliers to make sure that we could get FSC certification. This means, you know, it's a certifying body that ensures that all like wood and paper components that we used were made from sustainably managed forests. And then also, all the plastic trays that you see here were made from recycled plastic materials. So, and this was something that came about from like a project goal that we worked with the marketing team and, you know, the narrative design team on, and the product design team on. But we're able to apply these learnings because we were able to do all this and really didn't impact anything, any costs or how we could execute the game. We're going to take these learnings and apply it to other games as well. So we're, you know, in our goal to constantly be more sustainable, here's a great example how, you know, we were able to play our part as engineers to move our company forward. And now I will pass it off to Josh. If I turn the slide correct, yep. I was going to talk about making video games and being a gameplay engineer, which I'm sure everyone is very excited about. I am.
Thanks, Dan.
No problem.
Yeah, so I work over at Archetype Entertainment, which is a part of Hasbro as well. So we make video games there. We're currently working on a game called Exodus, which is a big sci-fi action game that just got announced by Matthew McConaughey not too long ago. So we're really excited about that. And so I do a lot of the programming on the team. Before that, I was running some independent studios, and we worked on PC games, Switch games with a much smaller team. So I got to touch a lot of different aspects of game development that way. So hoping I could step in here and talk about how video game development differs from physical game development, whether you're on a big team, a small team, or however you feel like making games. Next slide. So really, everything we've been talking about so far, it's a very similar process, very similar skill set that you're going to be applying to making digital games. So here's an example. At my last studio, we were working on a game called Par for the Dungeon, and you can see how it's a very rough and iterative process that you make something, you try it out, and then you try to make a better version of that while collaborating with all the different roles on your team. So this first screenshot on the left here was from a game jam, which is a competition or event where you get a very short amount of time, a couple of days to a week, and a theme. In this case, the theme was less is more. And you just have to make something fully playable in that time. And that's a great way to flex your creative muscles and just practice that iterative, rough working creative process. So in this case, the game turned into Par for the Dungeon, which is a fantasy take on a mini golf style game. But of course, there's a lot of differences with digital games as well. Um, so a lot of that could come into the engineering aspect of it. So where as a physical game, you have everything that Dan was just talking about, those physical restraints that you have to engineer around. For example, you can't ship a physical game out to people with 10,000 pieces in it. Like it would just cost too much and the box would be huge. But you can have 10,000 pieces in a video game. It's all digital, it's all ones and zeros, and computers are pretty good these days. So you could do that. But there's different difficulties that come with the video game aspect of things. So you take something that's very simple in a physical game, say you write a rule down that the player has to move their game piece into red squares. Well, in a digital game, you have to come up with all the rules. The computer doesn't know what any of those things mean. So what happens when a player tries to move their piece into a blue square? How do you respond to that? How does the player even move their piece? Do they click and drag on it? Are you on a mobile screen? Did they use their finger to drag it? What if they use their whole hand? How does the game respond? What if they're using a controller? Are you going to support that as well? And then what if like just different events happen, like the player's in the middle of moving a piece and they shut off the game? Did you save it? Can they come back? There's a lot of different things that you have to consider that you might not have to consider in a physical game. So keeping those different difficulties in mind, but also keeping in mind the type of player and the target experience. Maybe there's some players that rather play a board game. Maybe there's some players that rather play a digital game. So you want to keep all that in mind, keep the experience that you're trying to create, what you're good at, what you want to try and do when you're choosing between, oh, do I want to make a physical game or a digital game? But on the digital game side, just to get into that process a bit more, let's take an example, something simple. So at Archetype, maybe we want to make a switch in the game that the player can go and walk up to and push on this switch and something else happens in the game. So maybe that's moving a door or an elevator. It's very common in a lot of video games, your character is able to do that. Well, there's a lot of different roles and coordination that needs to happen there. Next slide. So you have designers who might write out a design specs. So these are all the different switches that need to exist. Maybe some switches you hold down, maybe some open certain types of doors. And then you have engineers that are doing all the things that I mentioned earlier, people like me who are coming in and handling all those edge cases, but also making sure it performs on different platforms. Maybe you're shipping to mobile, maybe you're shipping to Switch. Those computers, those chips usually aren't as good as something like a PlayStation 5. So you have to design for that as well. And then you've got a ton of different kinds of artists as well. So that Switch needs a cool animation when the player pushes on it. It needs a sound. Maybe it has visual effects. It lights up or sparks when it doesn't work. All those different roles at a big studio like Archetype will have a whole specialized role dedicated to doing that type of art. And often there's even special engineers that help with that as well. There's rendering engineers, animation engineers that write code very specific to getting those different types of art to work. But with all of those roles also comes in the need to manage all those different dependencies, those people that need things from each other. When is it going to get all done? That's where a producer comes in and helps to coordinate a lot of that. So there's a ton of different roles there that you could take on if you're interested in digital games. And a lot of these exist for physical games as well. Next slide. But if you are interested in digital games, some software that you can start out with is listed here. The best place to start is probably finding yourself a game engine that you feel comfortable with. So this is basically a fancy word for a piece of software that helps you make a game. So you'll be doing things like scripting some kind of programming logic, but also making your level. You can make art assets to different degrees as well. So you can make entire games with just that one piece of software if you want. Most of these ones I've listed here. And they're all the ones listed here are free to download and try as well. So Unreal is actually what we use at Archetype. So the same software that we're using at a big studio, you could go home and try out for yourself. And there's lots of tutorials online and things that you could follow there as well. And there's a ton of different programming languages as well. So if you're learning anything in school, maybe you're not learning what's used in Unity and Unreal, but you're learning JavaScript or Python or something like that. You could also make games with those. Lots of successful games are made with all different kinds of technologies.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh, so much. I'll take it on and just kind of share with you guys that obviously you've heard from a handful of us, but we are just a few of the folks on our teams. I think if anything we can share with you tonight, there is a wide range of talents and types of people who are going to come together and work together to make games. So we haven't touched on it today. That doesn't mean that role doesn't exist. And we're happy to share with you at the end a little bit more about some of the other functions that truly contribute in a huge way to what becomes a final product and a final game. But with that in mind, I will kind of close us out in terms of how you sell these things, because now we've made the thing, you've got to sell it in. On the next slide, if you don't mind, Sammy, the first thing that you're going to need is a hook. And what I mean by that is really a short and very clear promise. If you click for me. Beyond that clear promise, you're also going to want to make sure that it's connected to some kind of energy and emotion. You want to emotionally connect with your consumer, and you want to make it memorable. So if they can't remember what you had to say, it's obviously not that important to them. So you've really got to work to make sure that you can stand out in a way with a memorable approach. I'll share a little bit of a couple of different ways that we've been able to do this. I am understanding that you can submit your game ideas either through PowerPoint or PDF or through video. And so we'll show you a couple of different examples of what that looks like. First with a video for a new card game that just launched this year. So Piggy, in this card game, you're going to get your hands on some squealing, stealing fun. So you can showcase in that video the idea that you're going to hog it all to win and squeal your way to victory by stacking cards, or you can just show it on a PowerPoint slide. It's enough to tell someone you're going to have a good time with this card game and it feels really fun. We also are really important, really focused on making sure that the clarity of the game feels very simple and easy get. So here you see collect, steal, score. Obviously, this game is not that hard to get into, so it's going to be really exciting for families to just jump in and play. On the slide, we also include things like, hey, the real reasons for being and the unique selling points for this game that make it better than anything else out there. In this case, Piggy's got a break frame package and storage. Everything sits inside and it's perfect for on-the-go play. And we know consumers love card games for that flexibility. They also have really adorable piggies. The sculpts came out really cute and unique and custom art on each card. So even within just the snapshot on this slide, you can have a really good sense for what's important about this game and kind of how you play it and the experience you're going to get. Now, it's also really important beyond just having kind of a pithy hook, you've got to make it clear how you play and why it's awesome. You're not only going to tell them that, but you're also going to show them that, because it's important that those two things sync up really meaningfully in your pitch. On the next slide, we'll show you a couple of ways that we've done this with Life in Ruterra. So we've done it on PowerPoint slides. When we go and we pitch the Walmarts, Targets, Amazons, and other accounts of the world, we definitely use PowerPoint to kind of showcase what the game looks like, what it is, and how you play. So with Life in Ruterra, our hook is build a thriving community one tile at a time. And right on that slide and in our pitch, we'll tell you that it's got a really on-trend story that's baked with consumer insight in mind. We know that they like that theme. It's a tile placement game with unlimited variety. We've got incredible inventor partners who are attached to this game that we're really thrilled and really excited to be able to partner with. High quality components, restorage, and that FSC certification and recycled materials. We also know that it's built for expansion and can't wait to share more on that. We'll also showcase in the clearest way possible how you play the game. In early days, we might not have the whole game worked out even when we pitch it. On the next slide, you'll see how we've done that in a PowerPoint presentation. This game is very simple. You'll place a tile, you will either add a building or inhabitant if you like, or you can kind of keep that space open and try to make other things happen for yourself that are higher point scoring opportunities, and you'll score for bonus points with terrain. So here, this is an animated PowerPoint presentation. You don't really need to have a ton of skills to be able to do it, but it's very clear on how you play. And if you have the opportunity to do it in video, we'll show you what that looks like next. Awesome. So a couple of things to keep in mind. You're going to always come back to your why in your pitch. Why is it cool? Why is it awesome? Why did we make this? Why is it different? Why is it something you absolutely got to have? Why is going to be the start of everything you pitch. When you pitch, humor helps. So you want to be able to connect emotionally with your audience. And if you can get a laugh out of them, it's going to elevate the whole thing. So be authentic to yourself, your own tone, and the concept of your game. But if you can connect through a little bit of humor and levity, it's going to work in your favor. You want to keep your pitch very tight, and you want to test it on audiences before you pitch it out. I can't stress this enough. If it's too complicated or if it's got too much detail, people are going to get lost and they're going to get confused. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Test it with people before you submit your game concept so that you know that you are only including the most important and most exciting elements of your pitch. And last thing is have fun with this. Recognize that you've done something really amazing. It is very hard to design a game, from concept to designing the gameplay mechanics, components, and how you play the game. It is not easy. You really have an opportunity to show off and have a great time with something that you have built. One last piece of advice that I'll give you is being nervous and being excited are pretty much the same thing. So if you feel really nervous, if you've got to pitch something, if you literally tell yourself, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited, your brain and your body will believe it and it'll come through in your pitch. With that, we are all set with what we're going to share with you tonight and wanted to open it up to you guys if you had any questions for any of us. Anybody? Feel free to shout out or drop them in the chat. Awesome. Okay. We'll start. Hang on. I see tips for folks looking to get into narrative design. Olivia, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, totally. Hi, Emily. So if you're looking to get into narrative design, my biggest piece of advice to you is to read as much as you possibly can, literally anything you can. and to write a lot as well. Again, literally everything every day. Doesn't have to be good, just try it. There's a lot of different paths into narrative design from a lot of different directions. I would say one of the most important skills that I've learned as a narrative designer, and that I think a lot of my coworkers value as well, is learning to talk to all kinds of different audiences, especially as you grow older and you sort of lose touch with your kid brain and that sense of imagination. It's really important to like connect with kids, write for kids. I would suggest like watching kids content and connecting with children, trying to write for them is a really good way to like keep your imagination sharp, which is a really important part of what we do, because kids are so limitless in what they can imagine. Yeah, that would be my best advice. If you're looking to study something in college, we have a lot of English majors. I come from a journalism background, advertising as well. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Best of luck.
How do you get a team if you're using, say, Scratch? I'm sorry, Xander, I'm not sure I understood your question. How do you get a team if you're using a kid coding website?
Is that how to get on a team or how to, or maybe where to go from there if
Oh, like how to like join a team if that's
oh yeah. Yeah, I think Emily has a great suggestion there. Game jams, like I said earlier, it's usually an event of some kind. Global game jams, very popular. There's usually different ones around your community. If you look for something local, you can just Google game jams. There's usually schools and things putting them on. But it's usually a good place to meet other people in the community, and a lot of people are open to trying out different teams there. So I see a lot of the time people show up as like, I'm an audio person. Does your game need some audio? Or I'm an artist. Does your game need some art? And that can be a good way to meet people and experiment with working on a team.
excellent. Thank you, Josh. Awesome. Zito's question around accessibility for disabled players or play testing. Dan and Laura, do you want to take on any of that?
Yeah, or Olivia, maybe you could talk about Twister Air. That's like a super recent example, and then I'll throw a link in the chat for something else too.
Yeah, totally. So we recently came out with a game called Twister Air that's basically like Twister, but without a mat. So you wear bands on your wrists and ankles, and then you like match spots on the screen as if you would like place your arms and legs and hands on the spaces on the mat. It's a really fun game. You use it with an app. And as we were building out that app, we hired an accessibility consultant to help us make the game as accessible as possible, for example, for people who are in wheelchairs. So there's a mode of this game that you can play in that is more accessible for those players. And then we also did on Life in Reterra, for example, we originally had color differentiation in this game that was not colorblind friendly. And we actually went back and like changed some of the design and the visuals of the game to be more accessible to people with color blindness, which is also something we try and be aware of. Laura, did you have something else?
Yeah, I think we had the same problem when it came to a game called Mastermind, which is a 2-player strategy game. It's all about kind of colors and matching the colors to the code. And we had in the beginning some struggles when it came to color blindness, but we actually designed based on hue and saturation of the pegs to differentiate them for those who are colorblind.
And I've just been putting some links in the chat from an initiative that I've been made aware of for years now. I think we've partnered with the Autism Project to create this Toy Box Tools, which is a resource that makes games, well, all of Hasbro's toy and game portfolio more accessible via like augmented instructions or like different types of rule variations or well, you could click through. There are a lot of different ways that we could address accessibility. And Toy Box Tools is one kind of home for a lot of different tools for people with autism. So yeah, it's definitely like it's a very strong design consideration, and it's something that we always just need to keep learning about. So to apply.
And then from a graphics perspective, we'll also make sure to run colors through a testing to see how the contrast reacts to color blindness, as well as if we're not in a position to change the colors, we'll add iconography. So that way, if it is a game about matching, it's very clear to every consumer how to match. So it's a big group project.
That was a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking it. I'm so glad that we could share a little bit about how we think about inclusivity across all of our games and design. I think we are at the end of our time, so I would just want to say thank you to our panel, folks, my friends here. I deeply appreciate you. This has been fantastic building this, and also thank you to you and the audience, everybody who signed up to join today and asked really awesome questions and participated. You guys absolutely rocked this, and we deeply appreciate you. Marissa had reminded me that there is a feedback survey, so she'll drop the link in the chat. And if you don't mind presenting and providing a little bit of feedback, that would be much appreciated. With that, we'll say thanks again and hope you have a great night. Take care.